Not too long ago, I sat down and played through Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway for the first time in around 15 to 17 years. I had strong nostalgic feelings for this game and I wanted to play through it again to see if it stood the test of time and to see whether those feelings remain. And of course you'll have to check out that video to find out whether I did enjoy myself or not, but I decided to do it again with another favourite of mine, Viking Battle for Asgard. This game was released in March of 2008. And I think it must have slipped by many people because when I speak to them about certain games, I mention this one because I really have fond memories of it and no one seems to remember anything about it. Essentially what you have to do is liberate islands from Hell's Legion. Groups of prisoners are dotted around, being defended by a certain number of enemies. You then have to defeat those enemies, free the prisoners, and recruit them to your army. It is an open world game of sorts. You will be able to explore each and every island, and of course there is fast travel. Fast travel is something that you'll probably find yourself using more often than not. The environment in the world doesn't tend to be what you'd get these days in an open world environment. A lot of it feels quite barren, cold almost, and there is only one run animation for your main character. Let me know in the comments if you've tried out a game recently that you had fond memories of from the past. Maybe it lived up to expectation, or maybe it fell short. But when it comes to the gameplay, that is where this game shines. There are a number of ways to kill enemies, of course stealth kills as you can do in most games. You don't need to kill anyone via stealth, although there are enemies in the game who call other enemies with some sort of horn or bugle or whatever it may be. So you do kind of want to take those down as soon as possible, and the best way to do that generally is a stealth kill before they can alert other enemies. Because the big thing in this game is if you become overwhelmed with too many enemies, chances are you will die. Now that's not too much of a problem, you can restart and go again. You can handle small groups, 3 or 4 different guys at a time, but when it comes to being overwhelmed by a number of enemies, that's when it's game over and you're going to have to restart the level. I quite like that aspect because it does kind of keep you on your toes and you're going to have to go and pick and choose which enemies you stealth kill, although there aren't too many of those who call other enemies over. But it is nice that it's there, and it's nice that you have to sometimes think about it to add a little bit of variety. There are combos as well, generally just tapping 2 different buttons, but still the combos do exist. And of course there are different types of attacks like strength attacks, so it'll take a little longer to perform these type of attacks, but when you do, it is very brutal. And that does kind of describe the entire game. The game is brutal. Some of the kill animations in this game are fantastic, and they never seem to get old. The story, on the other hand, I did find myself not really paying too much attention to it. Yes, okay, fine, the story is there and they do try and pad it out as much as possible, and it's not bad, it's just something very forgettable.
Look around you, Scarlet. Midgard is dying.
This entire game will generally take you between 12 and 15 hours to complete just the main story. If you want 100% it, you can probably add on another 5 to 10 hours. So even though the story is becoming a little bit tedious, you're not really paying too much attention to it, it is essentially a rinse and repeat kind of game. Once you've done the first stage, you've done the following 2. What I mean by that is once you've liberated your very first island, and then you take your army that you've acquired and accumulated over that island to the main fortress, and you defeat that boss and you move on to the next island, you can expect very much more of the same. But that's not really too much of a problem because it will be enjoyable for you to get through. And that's definitely something that I remember when I played the game. Yes, it has repetitive aspects to it, and to be fair, you can argue that it's a very repetitive game, but my fond memories all stem from those large battles toward the end of each island. The large battles at the end of each island remind me of Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. They had some pretty large battles toward the back end of certain levels, and I'd always love that game for that. I should go back and play that to see if it is as big as I remember, but Viking Battle for Asgard handles this really well. Now bear in mind this is an Xbox 360 game, it was released in 2008, so it isn't really necessarily anyway known for being able to handle things like that. Even these days you'll play many games where you'll have slowdown and drops in FPS when there are too many enemies on the screen. This is actually very impressive because there aren't too many, if any, FPS drops when you have a screen full of enemies. You will come across the odd giant here or there, which you'll probably end up having to defeat with some sort of quick time event, which can be a little bit satisfying to see the animation, but once you've seen it, you've kind of seen it. And you do have the opportunity to command dragons every now and again, and more toward the latter stages of the game, but it is there. Now, whether I still enjoy this game as much as I used to is the question, and the answer is yeah, actually I really do. You can sit there for 12 hours performing the same kill animations over and over and over again and never get bored. It is a very, very satisfying thing to do when you're running around with an axe just chopping people up. This game is currently very, very cheap. I believe it has a PC release as well, so definitely something to consider if you want even steadier frame rates. And of course, if you don't have an old console, but you still want to play the game. And I'm really happy that I tried it again. I am scared to try some games because I know that they won't hold up. Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway did disappoint me slightly, but Viking shone through, and I would urge anyone who hasn't played it, and even those who have, to try it out again.